Interested in hearing from them. So first we have John Shaw from Sage Publications.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to give you a little bit of metadata about myself here for a minute, or the company. Let's see if I can get technology working again. I'm John Shaw. I am still the Vice President of Publishing Technologies, and I do work for Sage Publications. Sage is an academic scholarly publisher. We are independent. We are international. We're a 48-year-old company at this point. You probably know us well from being a social science publisher, but we actually publish a lot of STM in addition to that, and publications going back a long, long way. Sage has a lot of different types of products. And so when you think about Sage, I think, well, yeah, we publish a lot of books every year. I've been publishing books for all 48 years. We do a lot of journals, so about 750. And increasingly so, we publish a lot of online products, and those aren't derivatives off of books. They're just, that's new content that's going into electronic products. So when we think about metadata, we think about that. Journals, we think about it from books, and it's certainly on the new types of product and information that we are creating. So today I want to go a little bit into talking about metadata and from my perception, when I think about metadata, what it is. And you know, I think as we saw from Chris's slides, metadata can be so many different things. I was trying to think of an analogy yesterday, and I was thinking, well, it's kind of like food, right? Yeah, I go into a restaurant and you sit down and they say, what do you want? I want food. Great. What kind of food do you want? Breakfast? Sure, breakfast sounds good, and you have eggs and bacon and hash browns, whatever. But just think about it. We use the word metadata as just very loose. And so I want to get into a couple use cases of metadata and how I think about it. So when I think about metadata, in my mind, I think about these things. And this is just a very small representation of what I think about. And they're varied. I mean, you look at each one of them, you're like, okay, great. What does this really mean? But to me, and I'll go through that in a minute, these represent the collection of metadata, the use of metadata, and the delivery of metadata. And we could go on. We could go slide after slide and slide on all these initiatives. So let me just pick out a couple as examples. So Crossmark's a great example of metadata and live metadata. As Chris was talking about, it's not static. I mean, it's moving. And so with Crossmark, that initiative is really to make sure that a user understands the most authoritative version of an article. Let's just call it a journal article today. So if you're out there and there are many different versions and many different databases, how do you know that that's the most current version? Well, up to this point, you haven't. You took a wild guess, and maybe it didn't matter, maybe it does. Social sciences probably didn't matter, but in medical, it matters a lot. So Crossmark really allows a user to understand by seeing that authoritative stamp and then looking in the metadata that, to realize, yes, this is the most current version. And if the publisher embeds even better metadata into that, then you can understand the different versions that are out there and where they are and where you might go to find them. And so that is an active piece of metadata that actually has to be constantly renewed and enriched. So if another version goes up, it knows it. And this is through great technology, but also the metadata that's fed into the systems. It's only as good as the information that we give it. So that's, I think, a pretty good example. You know, I have a couple like systems in here. Systems meaning SMART, which is our internal production system, SPIN, which is connected, which is our marketing system, and then I have a system you can purchase for aggregation of content, CoreSource. So let's talk about those a little bit. So on the production systems, and again, I think we saw a little bit on this, is that through the development of a new product, we have to embed a lot of information about what it is. Sure, that's the book title, this is the author, but what's something new that we all have to think about? Abstracts for a chapter of a book. We never used to think about that kind of stuff. Multiple ISBNs based on the type of product that we're selling it and where we're selling it. And it goes on and on. Prices. There's a price that's probably different for every place that content needs to be sold. So that information is going into our production system, SPIN and SMART, and we're feeding it in there. And then that has to be then extracted out through the use of Onyx feeds or whatever it may be. It might be JATS or a TEI, which we use for books encoding. It might be embedded in there. It might be its own XML feed. and in turn that either goes out to an aggregator or to our online site, or in the case of CoreSource, a database that we use that distributes our content then out to many more aggregators. So CoreSource is feeding in metadata. We're feeding it metadata for our products and in the aggregate. So it needs to know everything about that product, every place we plan on selling it. It has to have a lot of metadata about different disciplines, so it can understand where to go when it's delivered out to the final point. And then CoreSource then will push it out to Apple or Amazon or wherever it's being sold. And that then has to be in the format that it needs to be in, and it has to have the right information, so when you see it online or a user sees it within that database, that it's the correct information. It has the correct cover. It has the correct everything. And so there's a lot of feeding of information that's going, and that's constantly being updated. That Onyx feed might be updated on a daily basis out to CoreSource to make sure that's the most authoritative information that's available. So that's kind of a couple different examples of that, and these are, like I said, not representative of the whole world, just kind of a few that I thought were good concepts. So let's talk a little bit about kind of product offerings when I think about metadata. So in this case, I'll say it's like it's a boring journal site, right? Okay, great. And you probably expect me right now to go in to show you encoding, and no, actually, I'm going to let them do that. None from me today. We'll test you later on the encoding guidelines. But what I want to talk about in this particular page is not about the fact that there's an article in there and there's an author and there's a DOI. That's all great stuff. That's all metadata. And we'll talk about that today. But what I want to talk about is, how did that page get to be here? How did we form that page? So it didn't just show up. And I don't have a developer that's developing it in HTML. No one sat here and typed all this stuff in. So what makes up this page? Well, we could do what I just said. We could manually go up. But Sage launches about 100 journals a year. And we have 760. We have to be extremely efficient about getting these up. And we can get them up in days, actually. And the way that we do that is that we capture the metadata about what makes up this product in one of our systems, in one of our metadata databases that's at Sage, that we developed to make sure that we could automate a process. And so the metadata database has a lot of information about what this is. What color should the page be? What images should show up? What tabs are there? It tells you everything about this, and that is metadata. And that is also updated. Every time we make a change or we need to add a new feature, we have to update the metadata database, which then will in turn help push that feature on or off on this page. So we think about that not only as efficiency, and it is a big efficiency, but what happened if we had to recreate this? What happened if it went down and we needed to build it back up again? Well, how would we do that quickly? We'd have to push it all out. And we can do that with the tools that we put in place to manage metadata. So let's kind of move to maybe a more pedestrian example. That's something we all know. That's Amazon. There's a lot of metadata going on, and Chris talked a little bit about it. But this is just a basic one I wanted to show. So we talked about CoreSource, and CoreSource feeds this page for us. Depending on where you go, if you go to the iBook store, it might actually have some very different information. We probably have a different price. We probably have a different description of the book there. And based on what we're trying to market and sell and the environment that it's going to, that information is going to be different. So what we're pushing to CoreSource is a lot of information for each instance that we're going to need it to be, how we need it to display on a page. So obviously the metadata is the basic stuff, the cover that we want to show on this particular page of Amazon, the price for Amazon, the ISBN that's right for this product, that type of content, which is an EPUB. But if it were a PDF, the ISBN would be different, potentially, and so on and so forth. So variable metadata, and there's a lot of that going on. And, I think we talked a little bit about the change. It's constantly changing. There's constantly new information. There's constantly new providers out there. We're always having to go back in and redefine what is it that we're trying to accomplish, what metadata will help drive that, what new standard came out yesterday that we have to update the metadata in. So it's a constant interaction. This is far more difficult than when I started 20 years ago and just printing the darn book and sending it out. It takes a little more thought. But there are a lot of systems that we have to make sure that this is done, again, in an automated and effective manner. So I'm going to go into a third example, and I'm just giving a couple different examples, and across the panel, we're going to go through all of the different examples that we could think, or a couple of them that we could think of, and then hopefully have some good dialogue and questions. So with this particular slide, this is one of our products, one of our online products. It's called Sage Research Methods. This is not a sales pitch, by the way. Feel bad, and we can sell it for $20. It's called Sage Research Methods, and it's a really great product because it was one of the only at the time that had all books, all things research methods, and this is one of the disciplines that Sage is known for and was based off of. So we had a lot of content that we discovered. We knew we had a lot of content, and through, of course, having good encoded XML, we could tell exactly how much content we had in the methods. But in particular on this page, and why I wanted to show it today, was how we're using metadata in just an instance of it. So sure, there's a lot of content. We have about 600-700 books in this product. There's a lot of metadata around the book itself. Again, the authors, the titles, the descriptions of what the book is, what discipline it falls under within. So if you go into browse, you'll know where how to find it in the hierarchy. But in particular, what I wanted to show was this thing called a methods map. And it's essentially a very visual taxonomy. And so we created the taxonomy. There wasn't anything in the methods or nothing that would be comprehensive enough for how we had published in the methods space. And so we wanted to build something that allowed a user in methods, or that's taking methods courses, to understand more about it. It's just a difficult discipline because it's cross-disciplinary. So you can have any major, and you have to take a methods course, and they're very specific, of course, to what you're doing, and then they go macro. So we wanted to help undergrad student really understand or capture the essence of what methods are. And so we worked really hard to not only create a great taxonomy, it was very cohesive and would dig down to the levels that we had content in and beyond, but also to allow them to see the hierarchy of how the discipline worked. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here. It breaks down not only into research methods, so it's kind of good. It's good to start with that. But it goes down into what we have in the area. So it is tagged at a chapter level. It's tagged at a book level. But the metadata is not only in how it was tagged, it was the metadata around the taxonomy itself that powers the visualization that you see here. So we had to couple those two together. What we see visually is what we had to deliver in a metadata feed. And again, that's an active metadata feed. When we publish new areas in methods, or we create a new area in methods, we have to continuously update the taxonomy and push it out, and that creates new nodes within the taxonomy itself. So really cool tool. And how we know this is effective is, search is important. We all hear, Google is how most students get at something. Well, when they get into this product, this is by and large the way that they're finding content within this database. They're using that tool. So we know that in the case of us using the taxonomy and how we put it together and the metadata that's powering it is actually working. And that's a great thing for us to see. So these are 3 examples that don't even begin to kind of dig us into all the use cases of metadata, but hopefully help you think about how we're thinking about metadata. And I think as the panel goes down, you're going to see different instances of it, and really interesting instances. So I hope that this will lead us into some good dialogue at the end of the panelists. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. Thank you so much.